So you're just in Brazil?
Yep, in Brazil. 2+ weeks. It was fantastic.
You missed me.
I thought about you a little bit.
The face you made when you said that was perfect.
Did it make you uncomfortable?
It did.
All right, good.
It really did.
Welcome to the Move with Motus Podcast. My name is Dr. Christopher Ellis, and joining me is personal trainer John Williams. We are the owners of Motus Personal Training and Physiotherapy. Together, we will discuss any topic you can think of when it comes to training and rehab. From the carnivore diet to hip impingement, you can be sure that all your questions will be answered. Enjoy this week's episode. All right, so what shall we talk about?
We're going to start with caffeine while you sit there and drink it.
Do you want to talk caffeine
3
or
o'clock
coffee?
in the afternoon?
Or are they the same thing?
I want to primarily focus on caffeine,
Okay.
and then we can briefly discuss coffee.
Okay.
Because coffee does have some benefits
Yes.
that
we think.
we think, that are different from caffeine, apart from the fact that it has caffeine in it.
All right, so let's just give the audience a little bit of an idea what we're going to do here, because John approached me and said, let's do one on coffee or / caffeine. And I read here he has a blog post on it, how he's very anti-coffee. So I have to play devil's advocate and take the pro side. But
Well, you're not even just going to be taking devil's advocate. You are the devil. Like, you drink 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day.
No, I don't typically. I did it for this podcast, so I want to be all jazzed up.
I also drank coffee this morning. Just heads up.
Oh, really?
I didn't get much sleep last night.
Hypocrite.
And I'm a hypocrite, yeah.
So I'm going to predict this. I'm going to be a little off the beaten path here.
Okay.
I'm going to lose this debate, yet I'm not going to change my habits. I'm still going to drink my coffee, which kind of means I win still. But there is a little modification I've decided to make through doing the research on this.
Did you read my blog?
I skimmed it.
It's okay. You told me to read your blog, and I didn't read it either. So let's just talk about what caffeine does to you.
Okay.
Initially.
Okay.
And let's see how good my memory is here from writing that blog a couple weeks ago. So you have this little molecule floating around in your body called adenosine. And adenosine is usually bound to this other molecule called adenosine triphosphate. Right? That's it? Am I saying? Yeah.
ATP?
Yep. So it's ATP. And that's your energy, right? That's the thing that makes you move. It's the thing that you generate from the food that you eat. And you need that, which is good. But when you break down ATP, what it does is that little adenosine piece of it gets released.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about the course of your day going through, you're using more and more energy throughout the day. You're breaking down a lot of ATP as you go. And adenosine is released as a result. Well, that adenosine binds to your nervous system, your neuroreceptors, on these little adenosine little things. These little
receptors.
Little receptors. So it binds to these receptors, and what it does is it slows down your neural activity.
Mm-hmm.
So it slows down your neural activity. That's what makes you feel tired. Right? That's like the primary driver of general tiredness, is adenosine binding to these receptors and then slowing down your nerve activity. What caffeine does is it's shaped just like adenosine. It's very similar. And when it binds to these receptors, it can fit in the little slot, but it doesn't cause the effect of slowing down your nervous system. It just keeps you going. There's no effect.
It's an uptake inhibitor, right? So in other words,
Exactly.
Nerves communicate at synapses, in the synapses where one nerve releases neurotransmitters and then the other nerve picks it up, but things can go in there and block that. So it takes the port, so to speak, and blocks entry into that new nerve. That's how the majority of basically drugs work. So let me get this straight. You can use your muscles, and that release of adenosine, which should make you tired, is being blocked. So you can use your muscles and keep going, basically, and stay stimulated.
That's a great summation.
Okay, got it.
And so...
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds great, right? Well, what happens over time as you become tolerant to caffeine is you get more and more of these adenosine receptors popping up. on your nerves and your cells. So it takes more and more caffeine in order to have the same effect as it would prior. Because now you have more receptors, more adenosine can bind there, slow down the nerves. So you need more and more caffeine to bind to these new receptors. When you get off of caffeine, like let's say you decide, like, you know what? I like what John's saying here. I'm going to jump off at the end of the podcast. I'm going to stop. Well, what you're going to experience, and this is what I experienced. Actually, I probably should have started with this story. But I went on caffeine for like 3 weeks because I wasn't getting enough sleep. So I got caught in that caffeine, lack of sleep loop.
Oh, let me just pause you there. Okay. I did read your blog. I'm just remembering because I thought it was hilarious. So you're like, I got addicted to caffeine in 3 weeks.
I got addicted to caffeine in a week. And then all of a sudden you crave it. Like you really need it. And then you get caught in this loop because you can't, and I'm going to talk about how you can't sleep as well at night. You can't sleep as well at night. Then you wake up fatigued, tired, and then you crave caffeine that morning. And then you go have some and it wakes you up, peps you up. And then that next night, again, same thing. You have a hard time going to sleep. Don't get enough sleep. Restless sleep. Up again. Again, it's just this horrible feedback loop. And so I got caught in that for 3 weeks. And even only after 3 weeks, what happened was I stopped. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I just suffered through one day, and I got caffeine withdrawal. I had a headache. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't focus on anything. I literally like took a nap for like 2.5 hours. And the reason that happened is because I had all these adenosine receptors that now had to go away. So now extra adenosine was binding to these bonus receptors without the caffeine, and that bonus adenosine attraction was causing me to be even more fatigued and tired than I would be originally, which was causing the headaches and the fatigue and the cloudy thinking and all these sort of things. So what caffeine also does, and I do want to talk about the half-life of caffeine here in a second. This I'm not necessarily going to say is like a bad thing. I don't really know. The jury's kind of still out on the dopamine effect. What caffeine also does is it's a dopamine uptake inhibitor. So it binds to a dopamine receptor, and it helps the dopamine continue to circulate in the body. So that's why you also feel an elevated mood as a result of having a lot of caffeine, on top of the fact that you feel awake and alert. Not really sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but obviously we do have these dopamine uptake systems in place that have been developed for millions of years, so take that as you will. When we go back to the adenosine side of things, we talk about the half-life of caffeine. The half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So that means after 6 hours, half of the original amount of caffeine you had floating around in your system now persists. Most people have about 150 milligrams of caffeine a day. That's like a cup of coffee. But like an energy drink, as an example, has like 300 milligrams. And I was drinking Bang energy drinks, which have 300. So it's a lot. Half-life of caffeine is 6 hours. So let's say you have 150 milligrams of caffeine. In 6 hours, you'll have 75 milligrams floating around your system. In 12 hours, you're going to have 32.5 milligrams floating around your system. In 16 hours, which would be the block at which you need to be like going back to sleep, right? If you get 8 hours of sleep a night. And that's if you woke up and immediately had your caffeine and then went 16 hours and then went back to sleep. So we're optimizing the window as best as possible. You still have 12.5 milligrams of caffeine taking up those adenosine receptors that should be being filled by adenosine so you can go back to sleep again. So many people are getting really limited sleep at night as a result of their caffeine addictions, and then people are drinking 2 cups of coffee a day, 3 cups of coffee a day, literally just to keep up with the tolerance that they're building.
Chasing the dragon.
Going to sleep at night, not getting enough sleep, waking up in the morning, going through this terrible feedback loop of needing caffeine and limiting their sleep as a result. Here's why this is an issue. You having caffeine and you feeling awake and alert as a result of your caffeine consumption is not a replacement for the restorative qualities of sleep. So if you're getting 7 hours of sleep a night, 6.5 hours of sleep a night, and you feel tired when you wake up and then have caffeine to stop that from happening, you are limiting the restorative cycles that you could be getting in sleep. You're limiting your quality of sleep, which is, we did an episode on sleep. go back and listen to that one so you can see all the bad things that happen. Just like your testosterone decreases. Well, you literally age yourself.
Yeah.
Immediately by limiting your sleep. So caffeine consumption, because of the mechanisms in place, is directly tied to poor quality of sleep and also a lack of sleep.
Sounds bad.
It's not positive. And after I got off caffeine, like I slept so well before, and I didn't realize, like, even in 3 weeks I forgot how well I slept. I thought I was like, oh my God, I'm getting older. I literally slept like a child the next night, and then the next night, and then every single night subsequent.
See, I think people just have different sensitivities to, well, basically any compound. But, like, because you sound a lot like my brother. My brother will have some coffee, and, like, he's like, my skin breaks out. I can't sleep. I'm nervous. And for me, I can have a couple cups. Like, I can not have coffee. I'm fine. Have 5 cups. I seem fine. It doesn't really seem to have a strong effect on me. For me, I just enjoy it. So, yeah. Trying to keep up with it.
What a scientific rebuttal.
That's the N equals 1 part of it, which I think, when you start hearing my side of it, I think you'll see that the N equals 1 anecdotal evidence is almost more important in this case.
The anecdata.
Huh?
Anecdata.
Anecdata, exactly.
So what's your N equals 1?
Well, so I was going to do a blog post in retort to your blog post.
Shots fired.
And then I started sifting through the research, and oh my God, there's a ton of research on coffee. And it's all over the place. And it's all contradictory.
Yep.
And the majority of it is observational studies. And so observational studies are pretty poor quality in general. They're looking for correlation, and we all know correlation does not equal causation.
Yep.
My favorite example of that is if correlation equaled causation, you could say that lung cancer causes smoking.
Yep.
Anytime you take 2 things and measure them and put them on a graph, you're going to find some sort of relationship.
Right.
You could, plot people, how much someone enjoys Mickey Mouse on a scale of 0 to 10 versus chances of getting plantar fasciitis, and you're going to find some sort of relationship. Mm. And then if you find a relationship, you'd be like, well, people that like Mickey Mouse probably go to Disney World a lot and do a lot more walking and therefore develop plantar fasciitis. And that's a bunch of bogus, right? So observational studies are there. It's supposed to be like casting a big net to see if you can pick up a signal and then research deeper into it. Yeah, so I started sifting through the research. RCTs, randomized controlled trials, are kind of gold standard. That's what you're looking for. But it's in the nutrition world, and I'm kind of lumping coffee into the nutrition world. It's really hard to do a randomized controlled trial. There's so many variables when it comes to nutrition and human behavior. It's just like near impossible. Like one of the ones I did read, there was an RCT. It was the control group had no coffee, and the experimental group had instant coffee. That was and they found no big difference. Well, okay, there's a big difference between instant coffee and ground coffee.
It's like a dark roast.
Yeah, there's so many variables there, and then you're also relying on the reporting, the self-reporting, how accurate is that? So there's a lot of problems with. I think that's why the nutrition world is so heated and just so all over the place, and there's 2 sides to every story because it's just
poor research quality and a lot of cherry picking of the data.
Yeah, exactly. So here I found this article from bonappetit.com. So this is not exactly research. I just got a kick out of this. They kind of tracked sort of the this basically gives a summary over a timeline since 1865, some of the headlines when it comes to research and coffee. 1865, coffee makes you pee. 1931, coffee makes prisoners twitch less when they sleep. Coffee can be refrigerated. Coffee increases the risk of prostate cancer. Coffee makes late middle-aged people twitch more when they sleep. Coffee won't give you bladder cancer. Coffee still won't give you bladder cancer. But it could give you a heart attack. Excessive coffee drinking increases miscarriages. Coffee won't give you bile duct cancer or breast cancer or ulcers. Coffee prevents cirrhosis among heavy alcohol drinkers. Okay. Turkish coffee raises cholesterol, but filtered coffee does not. Pancreatic cancer patients who are heavy coffee drinkers are more likely to manifest dangerous KRAS mutations. And on it goes. It's just, it keeps going. There's one, where is it? They did one with Spanish. Oh, yeah. Coffee increases the risk of osteoporosis among Swedish women with low calcium intake.
Yeah, and these studies get so specific, and if you go read my blog on video.live/posts, my blog tells you like a whole bunch of things that objectively coffee does. Like limits your sleep, it increases your heart rate artificially, increases your blood pressure. Like these are things that you can just take caffeine and we can study that immediately. These aren't long term. These aren't like observational. But then there's a whole bunch of stuff like caffeine might decrease your women's chances of having a stroke. How are you drawing that correlation? I have no idea.
Right.
Like, also it decreases your chance of getting Parkinson's and decreases your chance of getting Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
how are you
I want to get to all that.
How are you drawing those conclusions over these long-term periods? Because there's no way you study their caffeine consumption over these long periods.
This one I found interesting. Coffee is a mildly effective bronchodilator amongst asthmatics. Now, that one has, in my mind, it kind of makes sense. So, because caffeine is a xanthine, which is used as a drug, as a bronchodilator. So that one actually makes a little bit of sense. Coffee lowers stroke risk, although it gives you heart attack. So those things are...
Yeah, and then it says people say coffee like decreases your risk of heart disease, but like caffeine consumption increases your risk of heart attacks.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah, I just did a Google search for caffeine and insulin sensitivity. And I found 3 studies in a row. One says it increases insulin sensitivity. One says it decreases insulin sensitivity. And one said it has no effect on insulin sensitivity. Like right in a row. It was boom, boom, boom. It was amazing. So I love this. I'm going to read this little last paragraph here. That was so funny. So there you have it. If you're a late middle-aged pregnant non-prisoner trying to lower your cholesterol, you'd better lay off the Turkish coffee. If, however, you're a sedentary, asthmatic, premenopausal, old Swedish lady who gets sufficient calcium and doesn't use dentures, drinking more coffee could lower your cataract risk without an attendant uptick in heart attack incidence, provided you drink 4 cups a day.
That is a beautiful summation of the madness.
Conclusive evidence proving that coffee is good for you, or bad. But the point is that coffee clearly does something, or maybe nothing. It definitely is the cause of and the solution to prostate cancer. So I thought that was hilarious.
That is, I would say that's the best take on coffee and the coffee research that's currently out there.
Bottom line.
We don't know. What we can objectively say is a few things about caffeine consumption is the science behind how it works. We can objectively say it increases your heart rate. We can objectively say it increases your blood pressure. We can objectively say
acutely, right? Acutely
over the course of the whole day.
Well, it's like you know. I don't think there's a difference between like what does coffee do to you in 6 hours versus what about if you drink it every day for 10 years.
90% of Americans, including children, are having at least 100 milligrams of coffee a day.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is a lot of the acute effects.
They're technically acute.
Yeah.
But they become chronic because people are consuming.
Like, do they become cumulative? You know, like is the effect on blood pressure just for the 6 hours of the half-life? Or like if I just drink for 5 years straight a cup of coffee a day and my blood pressure is sort of elevated every day because of the sort of acute effects of caffeine, but then I go off of it, am I still dealing with like elevated blood pressure?
Here's what I would say, where we could probably agree on, because I don't know, and that would be an interesting study, A. But B, I don't think we can say that for certain. Like, okay, maybe that person it's not like lung cancer, right? Like, I could smoke for 30 years, get lung cancer, and then stop smoking. Well, I'm still dealing with lung cancer until that goes away. But what I would say is that constant artificially increased heart rate and artificially increased blood pressure is probably having adverse effects on your heart.
It could be. Or maybe not. So, all right. So combing through a bunch of this research, and my head was like spinning, I did see a lot of this. Inverted U-shaped curve, or J-shaped curve, right? So whenever I see that to me is the hormetic effect. So it's a term that's been thrown around a bunch. So the hormetic effect, it's kind of like, I think it was Nietzsche who said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the easiest way to sum up the hormetic effect.
Okay.
So in other words, low dose facilitates, high dose inhibits. So you see this thing, if you plot these things, right? If you do a little bit of something, your body will adapt to it. Well, you probably could make the case for that. But at high dose, it maybe kills you. So there's lots of, nutrition is an example, exercise is an example, sunbathing is an example. A little bit of sun is good for you. A lot of sun is bad, right? That's sort of the idea behind the hormetic effect. So there's when it comes to pathology, sort of like in toxicology, there's sort of two arguments. One is there's this phenomenon called the hormetic effect, which is just what I was describing, where a little bit's good, a lot's bad. Or there's the sort of linear model where this is either bad or good.
Right.
And a lot of like sort of medical system sort of has that linear model thinking. Like this is a 1 or a 0. Either you like it or you don't. That's very like a human sort of quality to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at a lot of these studies, you'll see this inverted U or J-shaped curve, and that is the hormetic effect.
Right.
And they've actually found like sort of the pathway, the signaling pathway. So basically what happens, you have something that maybe your body doesn't like, and it causes oxidative stress. And then what's called the NRF2 pathway is activated. And so what that means is antioxidants are now created to fight off that oxidative stress, right? Oxidation, antioxidation. It's the body's response. And over time, you get adaptation from that. That's the idea. Now the question is, so you can get this sort of benefit from hormesis and become a more resilient person by constantly giving you low dose exposure to certain things that are going to cause stress in the body, and you become
Like exercise.
just like exercise. The question is, and I get this from Paul Saladino, and I really like this concept, because a lot of the nutrition world sees things like polyphenols, which are things in plant foods, as positive because they cause this NRF2 system activation, and they cause oxidative stress, therefore releasing antioxidants, and that's seen as generally a good thing. Well, he separates out these two ideas, sort of an intrinsic and extrinsic. So you can get that same hormetic effect through exercise, through exposure training, through swimming through a 40-degree waterfall, as I just did in Brazil, without some of like the negatives that come along with the intrinsic type hormetic effect. So I'm wondering if something like this is going on with coffee. We're getting some benefit, but we're also getting some negative with it.
Yeah, like where's the line between? And it's definitely going to be person to person. Like you're not very sensitive to caffeine. Your brother is.
Yep.
Even in a very similar genetic line, we're seeing two completely different
Yep.
caffeine sensitivities. I would make I just don't understand what the value proposition of caffeine is. When you get a good night's sleep, you feel just as good. So I'm not necessarily sure what the added value is, what that value proposition is at like a 50 milligram dose, which is probably like where people should be to like get that little stimulation from caffeine, but also not have it affect their sleep the next night. If we look at the half-life, I'm still just not sure of the value proposition, because when I got off of caffeine and I started just sleeping well at night, I felt just as good, if not better, than when I was stimulating myself with caffeine.
Yep. So we're getting closer to my little thesis of you're going to win this argument, but I'm not going to change my behaviors. Right? So we're getting closer. But I will say, in all that observational research, I did see a lot of consistency amongst, may have a protective effect against cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, diabetes, and insulin sensitivity. Well, I mean, there seems to be something there. And all those things really are, the precursor to all those things really is insulin insensitivity creates those things. So if there's a signal, it might be there. I think the jury's still out.
Yes.
But I enjoy coffee, and I like to go have coffee with people. And I have a positive association between, like, I'm going to write a blog and have a cup of coffee, and it just helps me focus a little more. So that's why I'm not going to change my behavior, because I think the jury's completely still out. And I just enjoy it, and it doesn't affect me negatively. That's where I come back to the N equals 1. What happens to you? If you're highly sensitive and get addicted in a week, maybe have some tea.
Well, yeah, and I think most people would get addicted as fast as I did, because it is just incredibly addictive, and it causes for most people this cycle that we see. So, like I said, 90% of people in this country, including children, are having 100 milligrams or more of caffeine a day. Yeah. So we have very few people actually know what their relationship with caffeine is, because everybody's having caffeine every single day. So they have no idea how it's positively or negatively impacting their lives, because nobody's tried to just stop. I know everybody I know has caffeine on a daily basis. Nobody has tried to stop to see how it's negatively impacting their sleep. But everybody I know is also sleep deprived. So I would say you're probably the exception to that.
The exception proves the rule.
But when I just look around at all these things that are happening, it's like we could draw a very clear correlation possibly to caffeine. Nobody wants to admit that. Everybody wants to keep up with their addiction. And because they're in the 90th, like it's they're with 90% of their peers, 9 out of 10 people are going to agree with them. Like they can feel justified in their addiction and not just listen
They're
to.
sort of desensitized to it.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
We're just like, it is what it is.
I mean, you got to have some vices in life, you know? You got to have something. Can't live a perfect life.
I'm not saying I do. I had alcohol this morning.
This morning? Oh, yeah, that's right.
I went to brunch, had a mimosa.
He had a sour apple mimosa.
I had one very small sour apple mimosa.
Oh, my God.
Like last night I drank. Like, it's not like I live this holy existence, but my sleep to me is above anything.
Well, I think that's important. I do think if caffeine's messing your sleep, then maybe think of alternatives, or just cut it out. And I do think it's always good to experiment and just say drop it for a week or two and see how you respond. I think that's a great idea.
Much of this research came from, I forget what my first spark of interest was. Well, I think this first spark of interest was the fact that I developed this caffeine addiction. I was like, what am I doing? The second was I listened to this. I was literally trying to justify, like as I was like 2 weeks in, I was trying to justify having caffeine because I didn't want to stop. And I found this Joe Rogan clip. There was this some professor was on his podcast speaking about caffeine. And he quit for 3 months, and he was like he hated it. But one thing he did say was like he slept like a teenager every single night for those 3 months.
Is that Jordan Peterson, maybe?
No, somebody else.
That's all right.
So, yeah, that's my take on.
So
caffeine.
I did dig up something while going through all this research that I didn't realize. I didn't really think about it, honestly. It's just the glyphosate thing, right? So glyphosate's the active ingredient in Roundup. It's sprayed on most coffee beans, right? So this is kind of goes back to, I think we had this podcast recently.
Yep. Dr.
Stephanie Seneff has this whole theory that it's not gluten that's making people sick. It's the glyphosate, because the glyphosate's killing the enzyme that usually comes along with gluten that helps break it down. So that's the underlying issue, maybe. Regardless, it's a pesticide, probably not great for us, although the whole internet says it's totally safe. I doubt that.
50 years from now, we'll have completely different opinions on these things.
Yeah, totally. So I said I'm going to lose this argument, but I'm going to keep drinking coffee, and with one modification, and the modification starting today, I switched to organic.
I think that's smart.
Yeah.
I think eating organic, if you can afford it, is smart.
Yeah. We just should all have our own little farms in our backyards or support local, growers. That's the way to do it.
Well, you can, especially like if we look around at Florida, all this land, like we can easily have more local, small, organic farms in Florida that gives this small area all the food it needs.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be like an uptick in general across the country and, support and interest in local farming, which I think is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So, did we cover everything? I think I said everything I wanted to.
Yeah, I got all my points in.
All right, John. Well, I'm going to enjoy this cup of coffee.
I'm sure you will. Hey, just speaking of which, I'm not sure if I said this. I had coffee this morning. Did I say that? Because I didn't sleep well last night. I know I mentioned it to you. I'm not sure if I said it on the podcast.
You're such an addict.
I know. And I literally drank half the coffee. I started like jittering and like twitching. And I was like, I had to stop.
Yeah, it just doesn't do that to me. I don't know. I mean, but like I said, I've been drinking coffee probably since before grad school. So, I mean, over a decade at least.
Yep.
Like consistently. So, and I'll do like a little pot of espresso in the morning. But I don't know. You know what, John? I'll take a week off and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
I'll report back to you.
Yeah.
All right, well, if that's it, John, let's wrap it up. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, except in 30 seconds.
All right, bye. Do you have unexplained pain? Or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great way to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's liver function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It's sent to you with free shipping, and you get results in 2 to 5 days, no physician referral needed. Use the code DPT20 for 20% off. Go to letsgetchecked.com and use the code DPT20. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions you want answered, find us on Instagram at Motus Naples or send us an email. You can fill out a contact form on our website, which is motusnaples.com. Make sure to check out our blog and our shop as well, where there are downloadable programs that we'll continue to update. This is the Move with Motus podcast. We'll see you next week.